right, time for reparations, sounds of blackness. Welcome to Reparations Now podcast. I'm your host, Brother Jumoke Ifetayo. Got an exciting show today. We will be honoring and lifting up, sharing our reflections and the reflections of others on the icon in this reparations movement is now crossed over to the world of the ancestors, Congresswoman Shelia Jackson Lee. And to assist me in this conversation, we have two icons in the reparations movement, current reparations icons in the reparations movement, Brother Cam Howard with Reparations United, as well as Sister Robin Rue Simmons. And so we're going to just share our experiences and share what this Congresswoman has meant to the reparations movement. And we'll also have some reflections from other people as well, and also hear from her words as well. So, Brother Cam, I was thinking about it. We put you down as a guest, and really you're kind of like a co-host that comes in from time to time as a sponsor of the show. So, but in this capacity, we thank you for what you'll be contributing to the show. And definitely we're excited to bring on for the first time Robin Rue Simmons, and we'll have to schedule another time where we can really take a full hour and discuss with you the work of FirstRepair and the groundbreaking work that you have done, trailblazing work. That's what I'm looking for. Trailblazing work that you have done in Evanston, Illinois. And so we'll be scheduling that interview soon. Matter of fact, if you remember when I had the podcast before, when we did an interview, which was really early on, I think it was like in December, maybe just a month or two after you had passed the legislation. And I said to you then, I said, we're going to have a follow-up to see how it unfolds. And yes. So we're a little overdue for that.
A whole lot to report on since 2019.
Yeah, so we gotta catch up and get caught up on what's been happening in Evanston. But let's start out. We're going to share this clip from Al Sharpton, who is sharing about his comrade in the movement, Sister Congresswoman Shelia Jackson Lee. And we just want to open up with that clip.
Program. The great Congresswoman Shelia Jackson Lee of Texas. Congresswoman Lee was born and raised in Queens, New York as the granddaughter of Jamaican immigrants. Before embarking on a career in politics, representing the people of inner city Houston, Texas in Congress for nearly 30 years. Throughout that time, she fought hard on issues of civil rights, human rights, criminal justice reform. She was the lead sponsor of the bill that made Juneteenth a federal holiday and introduced the bill that reauthorized the Violence Against Women Act. In a statement, President Biden described Congresswoman Lee as a fearless and unrelenting leader, and I could not agree more. She was a true friend and an ally in the struggle. To say she will be missed is an understatement. I will never forget, just a few days ago, her son called me and said, Mom can't speak, but I want to put the cell phone to her ear so you can say a prayer for her. And I did, not knowing that I was saying goodbye to a gallant fighter and a friend, whether it was fighting for reparations or standing with us with the George Floyd family for Lonas lives in her district in Keter. She was always there. To say she'll be missed is like saying you'll miss something that you always knew would be there. But let's thank God for the time that she was with us and that she used her time to improve us all. This is a better nation and a better country, and we are better people because of Congresswoman Shelia Jackson Lee.
All right. So we usually begin our show by having our guest, or in this case, our co-host, Brother Cam Howard, to just share a little bit about your background and how you got connected to the reparations movement.
Hey, Brother Jumoke, man, it's great to be back on Reparations Now podcast, brother. And this subject, man, is one that's so dear to me, dear to my heart. So appreciate you being forward-looking and making sure that you incorporate a commemoration of our great leader, Congresswoman Shelia Jackson Lee, in your podcast. So how did I get involved in the reparations movement? Man, for years, I was trying to figure out what way I wanted to contribute to the upward mobility of African people in this country. And I initially thought it would be around our health situation. I wanted to be a doctor of naturopathy, and I was studying that for a while. And then I determined, man, that we had so many challenges that one in and of itself would not, correct all the many injuries that we have suffered, and that there was a root cause for all of these injuries we suffered, whether it was around criminal justice, health, education, economics, whatever. And that root cause was the crimes committed against our ancestors that can continue to plague us today. And I found out there was a movement that was addressing that root cause. And that movement was called the Reparations movement. So I joined the movement in 2005 and within Cobra, and just rose up the ranks in Cobra and became the national male co-chair. Was voted in about three times for that position. Then in 2022, I started Reparations United. So it's a little bit of my background in the movement.
All right. And so you can begin to share some of your reflections on Congresswoman Shelia Jackson Lee.
Well, certainly, I have to go before she became the lead sponsor to really talk about how important she was to the movement. Congressman Conyers had introduced this legislation since 1989. And in 2018, he was forced to step down out of Congress. And at the time, we had just introduced a revised version of HR 40 in 2017. And we changed it from a study bill to a remedy bill. And we were all motivated and excited. And then we got this blow that the congressman had to step down because he was really motivated to push this new direction. And we were looking, man, for someone who could fulfill, his shoes, which we thought were huge shoes in the movement, right? As a legislator. And we didn't see anyone. We then tried to get a collaborative of representatives to co-sponsor the bill or co-lead the bill. And we went to a representative of each of the Quad caucuses, the Black caucus, the Hispanic caucus, the Asian caucus, and the Progressive caucus. And we'd identified someone to do so. But then Congressman Conyers reached back and said, no, he passed the baton to Congresswoman Shelia Jackson Lee. And at the time, we were having meetings around HR 40 on a weekly basis. And she came to her first meeting that she attended. We knew right then she was the one. But we didn't know how powerful she was going to be, even though we clearly knew that we would be in good hands with her as the leader of this issue for us, 45 million Black folks in this country. As a legislative leader, we knew she was the one, but we didn't know how great she was going to be. And she quickly proved that going forward. But I want to go back to, now I'll talk about a little bit of that later, but I just want to go back to something that Al Sharpton said, that the president stated, that she was fearless and unrelenting. And those are the two most, the attributes of that sister was she was totally fearless on this issue of reparations. She didn't care who was in the room. She took it to everybody when they were saying, no, we're not going to talk about that. When Barack Obama was president, he was like, it's non-starter, let me bring it up. But she didn't care. She was fearless on this issue, and she was unrelenting, as the president stated. And I have to agree 100% with those two characteristics of her in regards to the reparations movement. But he was speaking about it as far as her entire legislative career. But I saw both of those attributes being played out on a day-to-day basis for over 3 years, probably four years, since 2018, so 6 years. Mm-hmm. I saw her being 100% fearless on this issue and 100% unrelenting. No matter what, she was going to move this forward.
Yes. I just recently watched some of the her colleagues from the Congressional Black Caucus, talk about her. And, I think, I've been listening to a lot of different, presentations and reflections on her, but I think some of those of her peers were some of the best. So if we could shift and pull up, I want to get to, I think, Barbara Lee, in the Congressional Black Caucus. Give us a minute to get that queued up. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I mean, you know, the energy that she brought to pushing HR 40, she was, and not just HR 40, you know, every bill, you know, you begin to hear from her colleagues that she was very effective congressperson, you know, very effective congressperson.
Yeah, she was a expert politician, if you will. She knew how to get others even across the aisle to, certainly not on reparations, but get others across the aisle to work with her on some of her legislation.
Yeah.
But she was able to, you know, even in that push to get, you know, HR 40 passed in the House, which we didn't get, but it was a struggle to get 217 Democrats to say, yes, I will vote for it. And, you know, initially we were able to just, and I'm just talking to your video comes up, but initially we were able to jump out in that last Congress on day one with 112 co-sponsors. Some tremendous work that NCOBRA did under my leadership. But it took us, you know, all the way into the end of the second year for us to get to that 217 mark. And we still didn't get it passed. But watching her work with us as we began to get, you know, down to certain congresspersons that just didn't want to sign on, you know, with her, held out as long as they could. But then, you know, we'll give her their names and she'll go and talk to them maybe 2 or 3 times. The next thing you know, they were signing on. But that was the type of leadership that she showed throughout that process. So,
yeah. All right. While we getting that clip together, when we go ahead and bring in another, as I said, icon in this reparations movement. We're very fortunate to have Rue Simmons as a part of our podcast today. She has made a name for herself in this movement. She will be always marked as go down in what we call her story in terms of this reparations movement for the trailblazing work that she's done in Evanston by pushing forward, not only talking about reparations, but instituting the first reparations payout for people of African descent. And so, well, we have, I can't say the first because we did have Rosewood, but definitely one of the first in a very profound way. And I think you all are up to something like $4 million at this point. And so, why don't you share again, as I asked Cam, just a little bit about yourself and how you came into the reparations movement.
Of course. Thank you, Jumoke, for having me on the show. I'm grateful to be here and grateful to work alongside you in the movement. I come to the movement as an elected official. I was serving on the city council in Evanston, Illinois, and was there with the intention to empower Black folks, bring justice to Black folks. I really was focusing on equity and inclusion, to be completely transparent. But it wasn't until a few years into my term that I realized that equity would simply not be enough for us to repair the legacy of the institution of slavery, that we would need to have policy as targeted as the racism that got us to this point of our racial gaps. And it was reparations, hyper-local reparations. While we continued the demand as a city to have HR 40 passed, that was a legislation that was actually passed in 2002 under the leadership of then council member, currently Judge Lionel Jean-Baptiste. So building on the work that happened in Evanston, I was able to work with other leaders locally, nationally, including CAM and many others, including the legacy organizations of Narcan and Cobra and other scholars and experts. And we led the passing in 2019 of the first municipal tax-funded reparations legislation for Black people. And that funding came from cannabis sales tax. We since have added real estate transfer taxes. And so that's how I showed up in the movement. I cannot say that I have the decades-long experience like you, Jumoke, and like Cam has. But I came in and I had the privilege to study under and learn from and have access to my elders and ancestors, including ancestor Dr. Conrad Worrell, but so many other elders, including those of you two, but many, many others. And I'd be here all day. But I just want to say that having access to the elders and all the institutional knowledge and the learnings and recommended readings and so on really accelerated my knowledge and therefore my leadership and my ability to be effective in the reparations movement. And I must let your viewers know, Jumoke, that in the very recent past, you did accept an invitation to be my senior advisor. And so I want to thank you, Jumoke, for keeping our culture and our history relevant in the work that I am leading and that of FirstRepair as well.
Yes, and I thank you for that honor, that privilege to serve with your organization. And also, you know, those of us who have been working for a long time, most of the work we were doing, I consider more like just preparing the ground, you know, tilling the soil, planting the seeds, putting the fertilizer in so that we could have where we are today and really moving to the next level. And organizations like yourself and the work that you've done and others, we were just primarily out there just educating people, and we did some things, but it's now moving to the next level, and we're thankful for that. I think we may be ready for our video clip.
The House will be in order. The prayer will be offered by Chaplain Kibben.
Would you pray with me? Eternal God, we pray this day that the soul of our colleague and friend, Congresswoman Shelia Jackson Lee, may now rest in peace. In serving you, none of us lives for ourselves. And Congresswoman Jackson Lee has spent her life in relentless pursuit of racial justice, social and economic equity, a champion not just for her constituents, but for all those who need a voice for change. Likewise, in faith, none of us dies for ourselves alone. And though there are many who are now enduring deep grief for her loss, may our deep gratitude for her historic and trailblazing career serve as the seedbed for an enduring legacy of dedicated and impassioned service to this country. Lord of both the dead and the living, inspire us through Shelia Jackson Lee's life, fueled by her warrior spirit, that in her death we would be compelled to take up the fight for liberty and justice for all peoples. Grant Congresswoman Jackson Lee well-deserved rest from her labors, and may your good and faithful servant receive your own well done and the gift of your eternal reward. In the hope that is found in your name, we pray. Amen.
That was a good prayer.
Thank you, Kim.
A great prayer.
All right, we'll work on that. So why don't you go ahead, and I guess you go ahead and talk about your experiences, Robin, and your interaction with Congresswoman Shelia Jackson Lee.
Absolutely. So and a lot of this can be seen actually in a documentary, The Big Payback, that is executive produced by Erica Alexander. It's still on Amazon Prime. But as I was leading the legislation, I had my first opportunity to meet the Congresswoman actually at her office in DC. I was in DC for the National League of Cities, where I served in a couple of different leadership positions there. And she took the time to meet with me to hear directly where we were at with the reparations legislation. At that point, she was already familiar, and she had shared with me that she was inspired by what was happening in local reparations and how it was helping to strengthen the national case for reparations. And our work continued in tandem since that point. And we served on, many panels together, and she was very generous with her time and allowed me direct access to her as I was continuing to learn and work with others to build up the local reparations movement. She accepted invitations that were really generous, coming to Evanston for multiple symposiums and town halls in Evanston, and also throughout the nation where other local leaders were leading local reparations initiatives. I remember working with her in Tulsa. She was there, I'm sure, multiple times, but we were there together during the centennial, where she was that strong, fearless, relentless voice for reparations. President Biden was there at that time. And so that's been my relationship. We actually, and this is a story that I love to tell because most folks didn't have this experience, I think anyway. But the Congresswoman and I wrapped up an intense panel discussion. And after the panel discussion, there was a bit of a social hour. And we went dancing. I went dancing with the Congresswoman. And in that moment, I think what she was showing and modeling is that we need to stay connected to the people. We need to have a good time, find balance, be true to ourselves, and have some fun when you can make time for it. And so it was not a long night in the club, but it was about a few songs on the dance floor, right in the middle of the crowd. And myself, along with everyone else that was there, was just so excited to be able to have a relaxed moment with the Congresswoman. It was quite an honor. And that's just how generous she was. I never could imagine how hard she works. Only in this season of her transition have I learned about how many ways and constituencies she served. Didn't know that she was a municipal judge. Of course, I knew that she was a councilwoman, but didn't know how she was an international leader, having the highest honor as in Pakistan. Just like what's happening in Pakistan, but just all over the world, she was showing up for matters other than reparations. And I think that was what made her so effective, is that she was showing leadership in other areas. And so she developed this rapport with her colleagues where they needed to listen to her because she was leading in their space as well. And that's another example of a strong, strategic leader that we are grateful to have served under. And we have a lot of work to do in her honor, in her spirit, with her excellence, with her fearlessness. And I know that we are all up for the challenge.
Ashe.
You're on mute, Jumoke.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You dropped a lot of gems there. I also, like you, just recently found out about how much international work she did. And she would get on a plane when there was a disaster in different places and different things going on in different countries. She'd just get on the plane and go, try to take some of her colleagues with her. Sometimes she'd just go herself. And that was, in addition to all the other things that she did and other fights that she did in addition to reparations, and even fighting for her constituency in Houston. And so, she was one of the things I heard some people say was that they had to work hard because she worked harder. Yeah, she was very effective. So on that note, since we're talking about maybe some of the different things that she's done, I came across a video where she spoke at George Floyd's homegoing. So let's see if we can get that one on. And I think that's, I thought it was good just to show her in a different light than like on a legislative floor or in the area fighting for reparations.
While we're waiting on that, speaking of internationally, just last year, she was at an international economic forum that was dealing with the World Millennium Development Goals. And she got a reparations clause amended into one of the 19.
Wow.
You remember that?
Yeah, no, I didn't know that. Wow.
Yeah, she did that, which was really special.
All right. Yeah, thanks for bringing that in, Brother Ken.
This is a time for the family. This is a time for the healing of the wound, of the pain that no one else in this place can walk and feel at this time. To the Floyd family, let me acknowledge your pain. Let me come as a humble servant to be able to respect and to give dignity to the ages that the ex-slaves' descendants have faced in this nation. Let me heal the wound of the majority of African-American men who have suffered at the hands of a wrong mindset, a warrior mindset instead of a guardian of peace mindset in the practice of law enforcement. But it is your time today. In keeping with that moment, allow me to offer these words. We know that centuries ago, they took a man, wicked men, put him on the cross, did not understand that though they were intending wickedness, that out of much intention of wickedness came goodness. Your loved one, George Floyd, this secular world failed in its duty to intervene, failed in its duty to act, and failed in its duty to aid. But George Floyd answered the question in death when it was asked in Isaiah, Lord, who should I send? Oh God, have mercy on us. There was a tall man by the name of Big Floyd who stood up and said, Lord, send me. And so as we come today, people of statute, those who humble themselves before God, we come to pay tribute to a man who said, send me. And I want to acknowledge those young marchers in the streets. Many of them could not be in this place. They are black and brown, they are Asian, they are white. They are protesting and marching, and I'm saying, as a mama, I hear your cry. That is what George Floyd wanted us to know. And I guess he wanted us to know, family, about CUNY Homes and Jack Yates. Somebody might have said, what good comes out of Nazareth? Somebody else might have said, what good comes out of Third Ward? I am so grateful today to be able to say a man by the name of Big Floyd walked amongst us down those CUNY home blocks, went on up to that crimson and red, and began to mentor and make a legacy that no one can deny. I want you to know, my friends, that as these members of Congress, give me a moment, Chairwoman Karen Bass, the Congressional Black Caucus, leadership Barbara Lee, Congressman Hank Johnson, Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher, Congressman Vicente Gonzalez, Congresswoman Sylvia Garcia, Congresswoman Deb Haaland from New Mexico. They're across the nation. They are here because they are honoring a brother that came out of the heart of Third Ward and Jack Yates. They are here to honor that leadership. So as I conclude, George Floyd was here on an assignment. It is painful to be able to accept that. I'm so sorry I know him in death, but he was here on an assignment. Some folk on assignments only get to stay 30 years. When the wicked men thought they had done something. George Floyd took it 46 years. He walked this journey. He left behind sisters and brothers who could stand up against the adversity of life when the camera came and people asked to PJ and others, "What do you want?" We want justice. We want justice. And so, my friends, I don't know if I'll ever get 8 minutes and 46 seconds, Reverend Sharpton, out of my DNA. I don't know if I'll ever be able to overcome the words, "I can't breathe." Eric Garner's mother and Trayvon Martin's mother, and all the mothers, and Robbie Tolan, I can't breathe. But what I will say, that the assignment of George Floyd and the purpose will mean there will be no more 8 minutes and 46 seconds of police brutality. There will be no more 8 minutes and 46 seconds of injustice and the mistreatment of African-American men at the hands of the laws of this nation and anyone else. There will be no more 8 minutes and 46 seconds that you will be in pain without getting justice. His assignment turned into a purpose, and that purpose was around the world, that there are people rising up that will never sit down until you get justice. And so I say to all of those who are here, to that, from Senator Miles, from Grant Malone, who works in this venue, all of these pastors, what we say is that we will not sit down, like Rosa Parks said, until justice comes. And so let me make it very clear as I go to my seat. What was done for wicked, for those who mourn that day that we know, came to a day where man rose. And so I say to George Floyd, it'll be up to us that his purpose and his assignment for the justice of this nation, for the fact that there will never be the brutality faced by a man that says, "I can't breathe," and calls to a mama who loved him so. That is direct and call for all of us. And so, as the Lord and the scriptures said, when asked, "Who should I send?" the first who said, "Send me," was George Floyd. Are they going to be able, or he going to be able to have each and every one of you say, "Send me"? To God be the glory for the great things he has done. May God bless his family, and God bless George Floyd and the United States of America. God bless.
Yeah, I remember watching part of that at the time, and it was taken back.
Yeah, very powerful. So you'll have some reflections on those thoughts that she gave there.
Well, in tragedy, there's always, it seems that hope comes out of tragedy. And, when she was prophetic to a certain extent, because a lot of corporate resources began to start flooding in the community as a result of George Floyd's murder. Unfortunately, it just didn't continue. But, all around the world, people saw and responded and reacted to that level of injustice that they saw. So, it had a tremendous impact globally, his murder.
Yeah, she said, "Send me." That's deep, I was thinking also, in terms of, the reparations conversation was also enhanced during that time as well, as people were in the streets and people were asking, like she said, "What do we want?" People, part of the conversation was, we want systemic racism to be addressed. And then the next conversation, well, how do you want systemic racism to be addressed? And the next conversation was often reparations. So it was also a lift for the reparations movement as well. That time period, so many, you mentioned corporations, but also philanthropy, also organizations, also church denominations. There was a lot of reflection on racial reckoning, repair, healing, reparations conversations were increased during that time.
And I'll add, Jumoke, that it really mobilized the local reparation movement as we see it today, with over 100 initiatives, many of them calling the question in that season of the lynching of George Floyd and the unrest that happened as a result of that. And so Evanston passed in 2019, and it gave a clear model, example, precedent on what could happen. And the Congresswoman amplifying justice for Mr. Floyd and Black people connected that conversation to reparations, with the Congresswoman being the national champion for reparations, leading HR 40. I'm certain that she inserted reparations in some of her talks and interviews and so on. And then at the same time, we had a local initiative. So most all of the initiatives that happened in that season around 2020, and there are many, if you really look at the timeline of local reparations, 2020 is when many of them began the conversation. Now, some of them didn't pass until 2021. For example, the state of California began its conversation in 20, passed in 21, if I'm not mistaken. And I could think of, a couple dozen others just off the top of my head that we engaged with at FirstRepair. So it was really divine timing on the unrest, the Congresswoman's leadership, an example to follow after. And here we are today with many municipalities. You mentioned institutions, denominations, industries. A lot more work needs to happen. But it was in 2020 that the foundation of the movement really was strengthened.
Yeah, one clear example is that it was Chicago. We passed our legislation. We started in 2019, but we had an actual vote 2 days after George Floyd's death. And it was because of the turning up of young people that the Congressman talked about. They really wreaked havoc on Michigan Avenue, the wealthiest shopping district in the city of Chicago. And as a result of that, people were looking, legislators were looking, council members were looking at that. And when we brought the initiative forward for a vote, they voted unanimously. And many of them quoted George Floyd, what was happening in the city as a result of George Floyd's death. And Asheville happened, passed their legislation about 2 weeks after that. So, that social upheaval, that notorious criminal act that happened in Minneapolis had a tremendous effect on reparations movement.
Yeah, and then I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but in terms of Robin, around how the local reparations movement has been, a push for has assisted, in elevating the national reparations movement in HR 40. It was, there are some people that feel like, they're in conflict, but but there's more of us that realize that it has actually been a boost for the national reparations movement, and
indeed,
Congresswoman acknowledged that as well.
Mm-hmm. She repeatedly acknowledged how we're working in tandem, acknowledged how we gave I can't remember the word that she almost incubated it. But I'll say that Cam actually mentioned the co-sponsors in the House. And that was after the local reparations movement had really gotten into momentum, that under his leadership in COBRA and with the Congresswoman's leadership, able to get to that 217 or so co-sponsors in the House, more support for the Senate companion bill, S40, more appetite for philanthropy to allow the reparations movement to begin to sustain our work, professionalize our organizations, and have more reach and social capital as well. So yes, there is no debate. It is a false debate, whether it's local or national. It is all levels of government and all institutions, families, organizations that harmed Black folks should be repairing them through a reparations process. And we have seen nothing but growth in the reparations movement, more and more support in ally spaces, more political will, more institutional appetite for this work since the Congresswoman has been in support of local reparations. And I think her vocal support for local reparations really legitimized the work. It allowed us to move forward without having to defend if it's right or wrong.
Right.
The Congresswoman endorsed it is right. The Congresswoman endorsed it is helping her and her colleagues advance the question. And we can see proof of that through the amount of co-sponsors that were acquired in that time.
Yes, yes, that's so true. I think we're ready now with the clip I mentioned earlier with Barbara Lee in Congress. This was a Congressional Black Caucus did something called a special hour, where they were able to have different people give tributes to her. So we may listen to one or two of those tributes.
Congresswoman Barbara Lee.
Our 40 patriot and a fighter to the very end. Rest in peace. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is now my privilege to yield to Congresswoman Barbara Lee.
Let me first take a moment to thank Congresswoman Sheila Jackson for your leadership, and for our chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and the entire Congressional Black Caucus tonight for leading this tribute to our colleague, our sister, and our friend. And to Sheila's family, her community, her friends, my deepest condolences. You know how much we love Sheila, and we know how much you loved her and how much she is missed already. Now, let me just say a couple of things. First of all, I met Sheila before I met Sheila. This was when I was in the legislature. I went to the graduation where my niece was attending college, Prairie View College, right out of Houston, Texas. There was a great orator who spoke at that commencement. This was probably 95, 96. This orator spoke probably about 2 to 3 hours in the hot sun. It was a great speech, and I'll never forget that speech. But it was over 2 hours, and everyone was listening intently in that hot sun. And finally, when I met Sheila, actually, you know what I'm talking about. Coming to Congress, I felt that I knew her because this speech was so profound until 4 or 5 years later. Hi, sister. Hi, Barbara. She was, first of all, an effective legislator. We know her well as being right down here on the floor. I think she had an amendment for every single bill that came to the floor. And they passed. She worked with Republicans. She worked with all of us. She was at the Rules Committee until midnight. She had more energy, but she was brilliant with her energy, and she knew how to effectuate legislative change and get bills passed. Of course, she led the effort for reparations, for the study and development of reparations. She picked that bill up, H.R. 40, from our beloved John Conyers. She led the effort to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act. And yeah, she was the lead author of the Juneteenth national holiday federal legislation, and we cannot forget that. And I have to remind people in her absence this year that as we celebrate in Juneteenth, we cannot forget the name Shelia Jackson Lee. You know, my grandfather and my great-grandmother, they were born in Galveston, and I had never visited Galveston until Sheila invited me to Galveston to be with her the first year that the legislation passed. And oh, what a reunion that was. And oh, to be with Shelia Jackson Lee in Galveston, Texas was the highlight of that year for me. She also was a constituent advocate. And let me tell you, right after Katrina, members of the Congressional Black Caucus were in New Orleans. Sheila went back to Houston because she received so many evacuees, and she called me up and she said, "Barbara, I don't care wherever you're going, you better come here to Houston." I said, "Yes, ma'am." So I went to Houston and I saw how Shelia Jackson Lee, in many ways, ministered to these evacuees. She had me out there and I was honored to be there with her, feeding people, clothing people, finding shelter, on the phones, being advocates. She truly loved people. And you know, when people got stuck at the airport in Houston, once my sister did, and constituents, I would call Sheila. She'd have me up all night long talking to people on the phone until the problem was resolved. She was dogged about constituent services. She loved people. She was a caregiver also for her mother. Many don't remember this. If you weren't here, her mother lived in New York, and her mother was very ill. And it was during the time that my mother was very ill. Sheila stayed on that phone talking to caregivers. I was on the phone talking to my mother's caregiver. We were comparing notes. We were comparing medicines. We were doing this, that. She'd get on the plane, fly up there, come back here. She was a daughter who truly loved her mother and took care of her mother until the very end. And I learned a lot from Sheila going through what I went through with my mother as she was making her transition. Bye. Also, Sheila was a global citizen. For those of you who've traveled with her, you know she was a queen. Sheila went to school in Nigeria. Now, I've been in refugee camps with Sheila. I've been on many CODELs with Sheila, some of which I led. And Sheila would call me way past the deadline. You all know what I'm talking about, like 24 hours before the CODEL departed, "I'm going." I said, "But Sheila, the deadline was 3 weeks ago." "I'm going." "Yes, ma'am." She went. But she provided so much insight and input and brilliance on all of these CODELs until members came back more informed and with more clarity about what the issues were we were dealing with. The last CODEL that I led to Africa, it was, I believe, in 2022, when during that period, the devastating flood in Pakistan occurred. You know, Sheila was chair of the Pakistan caucus. She had me on the phone as an appropriator from Ghana, calling back here, making sure that we were ready to respond to the devastation in Pakistan. Sheila said, "You've got to go with me to Pakistan." I said, "Sheila, we're in Africa and we got to get back to America first, and I've got to clear my schedule." She said, "No, you've got to go with me to Pakistan." "Sheila, I can't go, but I'm going to do everything I can do to help." Well, I could not go, but Sheila, we landed here in Andrews. Sheila flew to Houston. The next morning, she left for Pakistan, and she spent, I guess, 5 days there helping people through that dire, terrible flood that was taking place. And she would call me every other hour. "Where are we? Did you call USAID?" "Yes, ma'am." You know, that's how Sheila was. She was a person who was obsessed with taking care of people and changing the world and making life better for everyone. Our personal friendship was deep and broad. You remember she received the John Lewis Award recently for the most amount of 1 minute. And she called me that morning. She says, Barbara, I can't be there, but I want you to accept this award for me. I said, Sheila, they're not going to let me accept an award for you. She said, just do like I would do and tell them you're going to accept it anyway. But that was Sheila. She would not take no for an answer. Also, finally, let me just say, I was her personal photographer. Many of you may have been also. Sheila wanted to make sure she was in every single picture, and if a real photographer wasn't around, she pulled me. I was looking at my pictures. I have more pictures of Sheila than myself because she made sure she got those pictures taken, but they weren't necessarily for her. They were for her constituents, for her family, for her grandchildren, for her husband. She wanted people to know and to be informed about her work as their public servant. Sheila deserves to rest now. She was a force of nature. Her spirit will live forever. She was fearless. She was loving. She was powerful. And I'm reminded of one scripture, 2 Timothy. And this reminds me of Sheila. For God did not give us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. May Sheila's soul rest in peace. May she rest in power, and may she rest. God bless you.
All right. Yeah, she hit on some points there. And it's interesting because we started earlier in this conversation talking about fearless. That was you, Cam, right? I was talking about fearless. Actually, a quote from Al Sharpton, which was a quote from the president. But anyway.
Anybody who was close to her saw that. I mean,
yeah.
I was on several commemoration programs, or had a couple opportunities to share my thoughts on my relationship with her. And I always led by saying that she was truly someone who I call my leader because of her fearlessness, because of her oratorical strength that Barbara Lee talked about, and because she was relentless. But what stuck out most is that she was a warrior and she was fearless, and definitely I was proud to say she was my leader.
Yeah, well, it has been a good show. We are towards the end now, so you just give us some closing remarks, closing thoughts.
I'll leave mine right there. I'll let Robin share.
Okay, that's fine.
Again, thank you for having us on. And I would say that I hope this inspires us to work harder than we ever have in the reparations movement. That in her transition, we have learned so much about exactly how hard she worked. She wasn't just showing up when we saw her, she was showing up quadruple time so that she was more effective for her call and demand for reparations. And so I hope this reignites the movement, every arm of it, from local to the national case, every organization and institution, I hope is inspired to lead without any fear and with absolute excellence.
Just one thing I would like, thank you, Robin, that was excellent. One thing I also like to share is that there'll be services for her in Houston on Wednesday and Thursday.
We got you.
So
go ahead, keep talking. I'm sorry, but we're going to put that up on the screen right now.
Okay, great. So hopefully C-SPAN will carry it and people can tune in.
Yeah, she's lying in state. She's only second person to lie in state in Houston. And their services looks like Monday through Thursday. Yeah, there it is on the screen. Monday through Thursday, there are services for her. So yes, thank you for bringing that in, Brother Cam. Almost forgot.
So I'll be going down there for the Thursday service. Robin also will be going. And, I was reminded of when Congressman Conyers transitioned, and he had a big service in Detroit. President Bill Clinton came. Of course, Stevie Wonder was there. Stevie Wonder wrote the song "Happy Birthday" to Martin Luther King that Conyers passed that bill.
Yes,
so
right.
It was a celebration of Conyers' transition, and I'm certain that this was going to be also a celebration of the Congresswoman's transition, all the powerful work that she's done.
Yes. and she deserves that. And again, as Robin said, we, when we lift up these people, we hopefully use their life to inspire us to stay on the battlefield and to work even harder and to bring excellence to the work that we do, so that people will remember the work that we did. So we're thankful for her inspiration, for her role modelship of what it means to be an effective leader in our community. And I just want to thank you both. Thank you, Cam Howard, for all of the work that you do, and Black Excellence Leadership, Reparations Thought Leader. Thank you, Sister Robin Rue Simmons, as your work that you do as a trailblazer and bringing the community together in your very humble way, and being a shining light for other folks that's following in your footsteps and live in local cities as well. So,
thank you, Brother Jumoke.
Thank you.
So you've been listening to Reparations Now podcast, or watching Reparations Now podcast, with your host, Brother Jumoke Ifetayo. We've had a rich discussion looking at the life and the legacy of Congresswoman Shelia Jackson Lee, and the impact that she has had on our community, the impact that she's had in the reparations movement. We've had two very high-level reparations activists to bring you their reflections on the impact that she had in their lives and the impact that she's had on this movement. And so we encourage you to, we see in the chat, we got Scully, and we thank you for your comments. And also anybody, we encourage you to subscribe and support this show, share it with your friends and family. And I want to thank my engineer, Brother Major. As we close out, as we always do, reparations now, reparations now, reparations now.